Today is July 9th, 2019. My name is Jason Higgins. I'm a Ph.D. candidate in American History at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. I'm in Buffalo, New York at the Veterans Treatment Court. Joining me for an interview today is Manny Welch. This interview is part of the Incarcerated Veterans Oral History Project. Mr. Welch, I want to thank you for your willingness to share your story and participate in the project.
You're welcome, no problem.
May I call you Manny?
Sure, that's fine. Everybody calls me Manny.
Great. And do I have your permission to record the interview?
Yes, that's fine.
Great. And some brief background information. When and where were you born?
Born in Leroy, New York, up here in Western New York. Born in Leroy, New York, graduated in 1975 from Leroy High School. From there, went to the military. In 1975, went to the military, was stationed in Long Beach, California, and then eventually Alameda, California. Aboard the USS Coral Sea from 1975 to 1979.
What was your highest rank?
Highest rank was E4.
Did you ever serve in a combat zone?
No, I never served in combat zone. I'm the end of Vietnam era, and I'm the beginning of the Gulf, so I'm like right in the middle. I got a lot of information from a lot of the guys coming back from Vietnam, and some of the stuff that I heard, and I got a lot of stuff from the guys getting ready to go into the Gulf. So it's like I'm right there in the middle, you know. So.
What was the status of your discharge?
Honorable discharge, yes.
Have you ever been diagnosed with PTSD?
Never been diagnosed with PTSD, but I'm diagnosed with depression, anxiety, and chemical dependency.
Is that service related?
Service connected, yes, sir.
And do you have a documented disability as well?
Yes, I do. Documented disability.
Do you have access to counseling services if you need?
Yes, I do. Access. I have a lot of access just by me also working at the Veterans Affairs VA hospital now. I have access to my doctors, my counselors, access to regular co-workers, depending on who they are. You know, I've always got access to somebody to go talk about whatever might be going on, because I still suffer from a lot of stuff, and I still go through things from time to time. So I always have an outlet.
I always want to make sure, because I know that talking about things can
Right.
resurface trauma.
Right.
I want to make sure that other people
Right.
have those
Exactly.
after the interview.
Exactly.
Have you ever been incarcerated?
Yes, been incarcerated many times. That's what got me to Veterans Treatment Court. Incarcerated for chemical dependency. I was even incarcerated for a moment while I was in the service. But most of the time, a lot of my issues started after. Well, some of them started in the service, but a lot of it started after the service, not really knowing that I dealt with mental health issues, and then led me to various times of being arrested for chemical use and things like that. And a lot of it started in California, where I lived in Oakland for 18 years.
Before the service?
No, that was after the service. I got out of the service in '79, and I stayed in Oakland, California.
And whenever you say chemical dependence, what?
Substance abuse use, cocaine, crack cocaine, marijuana, alcohol, you name it, whatever the case may be at the time. From that point on, it destroyed a marriage, which led into divorce, which led into incarceration out there, which led to some homelessness. And then eventually, after being out there for probably 18 years or so, brought me back to New York State, where my addiction continued to progress, which led to me back in jail again various times, which I was actually in regular drug court before Buffalo Treatment Court came to be. I was in regular drug court, and being in regular drug court, I wasn't on board, so I was in and out, warrants, in and out, jail, warrants, in and out. And in 2008, my dad had passed through all of this, and that's when Buffalo Treatment Court came into conception. I was already, after my dad passed, I was already doing another 30-day run. Already another warrant on me from regular drug court. And then when I finally got caught again and back in jail, they told me about the Veterans Treatment Court, and Jack O'Connor, Hank Porowski, and Judge Russell, they decided to take the veterans who were incarcerated and put them in this new court, Veterans Treatment Court. And I was one of the first ones out of there to come into the Veterans Treatment Court, and that was in October of 2000. That was probably, I don't know, around June maybe 2008, something like that. But my last incarceration was October 25th, 2008, and I asked Judge and them to sentence me out because I'd been in and out of jail so much. I just wanted to get it over with, but they wouldn't let me sentence out. They told me I was going to complete and get myself together, along with the court counselor, Pamela Mancuso, and at the time, Nikki Slaughter was the VA liaison. And they got me into a program, VA program, which started me on the journey that I'm currently on now. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was
Yeah.
a great overview. Can we take a step back?
Sure.
And just ask, who were your parents? What did they do?
My mom and dad, Manuel R. Welch and Hattie Marion Welch. My dad was a factory worker, worked at Lap Insulator, Leroy, New York, foreman and general supervisor. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. 2 siblings. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. Both of my brothers now left New York, and by me living in California, they eventually came to California, and eventually I'm the one that ended up back in New York while they're still out there. So, yeah, my mom was a homemaker, and she did a lot of stuff running around for us as we played sports. We all had paper routes. I had paper route. So we were all bred and born into working. And, my dad was, I don't want to say really, really strict, but he was a proud man, and he worked and believed in working and taught us the right way. Taught us good morals, good values, good goals, how to be goal directed, and very church going guy, and he always defended me even in and out of my escapades back in New York State when I first came back. He got to the point to where he even learned. I was in Strong Memorial Hospital in Rochester, and he even took the time to learn about what I was suffering from. Because a lot of people don't really understand chemical dependency. A lot of people say that, oh, you can just stop when you want to stop and stuff like that, but when you're suffering from mental health issues and chemical dependency issues as well, it's not easy. It's easier said than done. So my dad and my aunt, my mom, and a couple of relatives, they took the time to come to a few family counseling sessions to learn about what I was going through and what I was suffering from. And that gave them a little bit more perspective on it.
Sounds like a very supportive family.
Yeah, everybody had a lot of support. Even in my current marriage, a lot of support. Do a lot of self-help stuff, so I've always had the support. It's just that you have to get ready, and you have to be ready to stop. You can't just wait for somebody. I mean, even being in Veterans Court, they would give me opportunities, but you have to be ready to stop. You have to get to that point, which was, for me, October 25th, 2008, got to that point where enough was enough.
That was your rock bottom.
That was it. Well, it wasn't so much of a rock bottom as so much of a, again, here I go again with this. Because, I was I'm married to the same woman for 28 years. So 18 years of my 28 years, was in active addiction with her as well. And she's a member of a self-help community as well. And so it's like I still had my home. I still had, I was still able to go to work. But it was being 50 years old and still going to jail.
Yeah, sure.
enough was enough, with 3 kids, young kids. I have 7 kids total.
Oh.
2 kids from each previous marriage, which I don't really have a relationship with. Addiction, exactly. The first one was in a service with the grandparent. Her grandfather and I served on the same ship, and then when he retired, he moved out of the area, so that kind of took them away, for a minute. And then the second marriage was all the addiction, that's led into divorce, after 7 years. And
So, whenever you were younger, was college an option for you?
college was an option, but college is not something that I wanted to do.
Okay.
The options, it's funny, the options were either go to work at the plant with me,
With your father?
yeah, with my dad, or go to college, which I wasn't a very good student at the time, had to go to summer school, or go into the service. So I wasn't really too keen on any of those because I wanted to like kind of hang out with the rest of the guys, like in a small town in Leroy, a lot of guys would just hang out or whatever, I just wanted to kind of hang out and like be a hippie or whatever the case may be, but not even a hippie, but I wasn't ready to do anything. I just wanted to, so
Be a kid.
yeah, so Dad told me that wasn't happening. Yeah. So
What did young people do for fun in Leroy?
in Leroy,
Yeah.
hang out, a lot of beer blasts, a lot of parties, stuff like that, sports, things like that,
Did you ever get in any trouble as a teenager?
Oh yeah, I got in trouble a few times as a teenager. And one thing about the little town of Leroy, everybody knows everybody. Back then, nowadays, I don't know so much because the town has changed. We still own our family house there. My brother takes care of that. He lives in California, but he manages it. There's renters in there. Every so often, when I do go down that way, I do drive down through the old neighborhood. But yeah, we as kids, I mean, back then you got to remember, in 1975, the legal age to drink was 18 years old. So we were doing a lot of that at 16 and 17 and 18, and it was all about the beer parties and smoking a little marijuana and stuff like that. That's okay.
So, just minor stuff that you next.
Yeah, nothing. In basically a lot of the friends, you gotta be mindful that there weren't that many African American families in Leroy at the time. I even wanted to go to the town down the street where my dad went to school because there were more. My relatives were down there. I played a lot of sports down there, which I didn't play too much sports in Leroy. Culture or whatever the case may be, I don't look at it as race. I just, because back then you don't really know nothing about all of that. It wasn't predominant, especially growing up there. So, a lot of my friends, they all had my back or whatever. Somebody said something derogatory or against me or whatever. They always stood up for me. They always, had my back. And a lot of times we would all get in trouble. And you never knew which parent was coming down to the police station to pick you up. So, a few times it was a couple of my friends' parents would come, and then sometimes my parent would come. And, back then you could get reprimanded by anybody. Not today they call CPS, but back then there was no CPS. Well, there was, but, the people down the street could whoop your tail and send you home, and then you get another whooping when you get home, too. So,
did the parents of the white children blame you?
No, there was no blaming. There was no blaming. We were all in it together because a lot of them worked at the plant. So a lot of the parents knew Dad. My dad knew all the parents. We knew the police. The police knew all of us. They knew all of our parents. They say, oh, okay, we're gonna go get so and so or whatever the case may be. So no, there wasn't no blaming for anything. One get in trouble, we all get in trouble, and it worked vice versa. Sure. Somebody says something about them or something to them, and I'm right there, and I got their back as well. So yeah, there was none of that going on. Yeah.
Would you consider your life before the military is in any way traumatic? Do you, in hindsight, think that you experienced trauma as a young person?
No trauma. No. A lot of it was probably just emotional, but nothing traumatic.
Okay.
A lot of it was just wanting to be accepted, being a part of, and I think a lot of that carried over to when I went to the service. So no, nothing traumatic.
So whenever your father gave you those three options, what made you choose the
Oh,
military?
the option was, so I went to take the ASVAB test, and I didn't do. I went to take it for the Air Force, and I didn't really do it very well. I didn't kind of wanted to not go, so I didn't do very well. So then it came. He said we took me to the Navy recruiter, and just so happens that my dad knew the Navy recruiter. So after one of my escapades of being out and coming home, and the Navy recruiter was there at the house with my dad, and they were talking, and so I went and took the test again, and passed that. But I took it with some stipulations. Um, Being a kind of wise guy, this is what I wanted. I wanted this. I wanted that. Can you give me that? If you can't give me that, then I want this. If you can't do this, so basically, I requested to go to Orlando for boot camp because that's where the girls were. Yeah, I didn't want to go to Great Lakes because it was cold, and I wanted to be stationed afterwards in California. So when it came time for me to go to boot camp, they told me that if I couldn't get everything that I wanted, it could be called a breach of contract. So being a kind of wise kid, but I knew that. So when they told me I couldn't go to Orlando, I told them, well, that's a breach. So I'm not going to the Great Lakes, and I'm not going in. And they said, well, let's see what we can do. So then they worked it out. And they called back, and I ended up going to Orlando for boot camp. So my dad said no excuses. So, he was proud of me that that I did go. He was proud of me that I did go. And looking back on it now, I'm glad that I did go. The first 2 years were kind of rough. Didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be there. I was an E2. I was getting all the crappy jobs. I wanted to go AWOL. And I just wasn't feeling it. So my dad, once again, I called my dad, and I asked him and told him what was going on. And I said, I don't think I'm going to stay. He goes, well, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I'm going to leave. He's like, well, where are you going to go? I go, I'm going to come home. He goes, you're not going to come here. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're not coming home. If you come home, I'm turning you in. I'm like, really? He's like, so let me tell you. So he goes, let me tell you something. He said, let me tell you how to handle this. So he talked to me, and he told me, he says what I needed to do. He says, look, you need to make rate. He said, you need to learn how to make rate. He said, you need to learn all the positions on the ship, whatever you're doing. I was a machinist mate. I worked in the engine room, generator room, pump room. I was on a carrier, so I learned how to work the throttle, to launch the planes, steam. And he said, you need to learn these things and make rate. He says, because the more rate you make, the less crappy jobs you get. So I said, okay. So I listened, and then I went and I took the E3. I made E3. And then once making E3, things changed. And then a lot of the E5s were getting out. So I made E4 after that. Me and another guy from Chicago made E4 together. And then things got very different because now we're in charge of the pit, and we're giving the E2s the crappy jobs. And, so my dad gave me that information supportively and guided me, to where I could make a better, decent career for my next 2 years, which I did. Were the fun 2 years overseas, Westpac, Philippines, Korea, Australia, Yokosuka, Japan, Hawaii. So it was a good decision.
Did your father serve in the military?
My father was Air Force, and that's what made me go to Air Force first. My father was Air Force, 4 years.
War II era?
Korean.
Korean War.
Mm-hmm.
Did he serve in the Korean War?
Served in the Korean War, yeah. And then my uncle, my dad's brother, did 34 years in the Air Force. My dad did 4. My uncle did 34. And then I had 2 other uncles that did Air Force. One did Air Force, one did Coast Guard. So there was some military in my family.
Did you hear a lot from that generation growing up about how the military could serve as a way for social mobility, especially for
Didn't hear any of that.
African-Americans?
Didn't hear any of that. A lot of them never even talked about it. I mean, my dad was part of the VFW post. They marched in all the parades, but it was not a lot of talk about it. It wasn't a lot of, like today I talked to my son about it, but they're not, I don't. He's graduated from college and since, but I talked to him about it. But no, there was not a lot of talk about going into the service or doing that. It was a decision that even some of my high school mates went after I initially went in. I was like the first out of my high school class to go in. After I initially went in, then there was about 3 or 4 that followed me in. After I'd already been in, then they went in.
So your father would have been one of the first classes, I guess, to integrate during the Korean War era. Did he ever talk about
Never talked about the service. My dad wasn't a racist guy. He didn't never talked about it. Probably a lot of it probably took place, but my dad never.
He just never talked about it.
No, because my dad got along with everybody. He was like Big Manny. He got along with everybody, and everybody in town always had my dad's back too. There was some issues a couple times in the bars where some of the guys that worked for my dad stepped in and took care of that. They don't worry about that. We got this. So there was never. I wasn't grown up or subjected to it. So until the service.
Can you talk about that?
In the service?
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff in the service when it comes to like the racism or the racial disconnect, you could be best friends with a white guy or whatever the case may be, but when you get to certain points, they're going to go one direction, you're going to go the other direction, and if you end up in that direction or if they end up in your direction, you better have somebody's name or say somebody's name to where if somebody converges on you, you better know who you're talking about and where they are.
So it could get dangerous.
It could get dangerous. I even did a little stint in the Philippines due to a fight in the Philippines, and then just being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
You were off base?
I was off base, yeah. And then some of the guys that I know, like I said, some of the white guys, they came and they're like, yo, so they helped get me out and I got back to the ship. But it just took a lot. It was just segregation, and I didn't know anything about it.
Right. So you crossed like a color line.
Yeah.
With women?
Huh?
With women in the Philippines?
No, with the men.
Okay.
Not so much in the Philippines, but maybe Japan. The Japanese men didn't really like Americans either way, white or black. They didn't want you really dealing with their women. So that caused some conflict. And then it seemed like a lot more of the racial segregation came out in Japan. Whites, blacks, women, Japanese. So I think that's the only place that I really, really saw a lot of it. Australia was really nice. I didn't see much of it. They all welcomed as long as you were in uniform. The Philippines, like I said, you were in this part, they were in that part. Korea was pretty decent. There was no issues. It was basically Japan where a lot of the issues were.
So as an E4, what was your occupation?
I'm a machinist mate. I was a machinist mate. I worked in the engine room. 600-pound turbo steam engines. Then I learned how to. Back then, a lot of it is nuclear now, but back then it was steam. So as I made E4, like I told you, I became a generator top watch with another cat who was from Chicago. We became generator top watches, and I became throttlemen. Throttlemen was the ones that control the speed of the ship, control the speed of the steam from the boiler rooms, to launch the airplanes off the catapults. Learned how to do that, and learned how to do the lube oil flats, the pump room, where a lot of the the, the the oil and a lot of all of that type of stuff takes place, and in the shaft alleys where you have to go down and you have to maintain the shafts that turn the propeller that drive the ship. So yeah, I learned all of those areas. And
on your off time, were you allowed to drink?
oh yeah, on your off time you party, Liberty call, man. You hit the street running. Some days you don't want to get out. You know, you're just like hungover or whatever the case may be, and then everybody's like, "Come on, man, it's time to go." And then before you know it, you're in the shower, you're dressed, and you're out on the town again. You know, so yeah, a lot of that.
Kind of a culture of drinking.
Yeah, you know, I think the service teaches you how to drink. You know, I mean, you might have been drinking a little bit when you were a kid growing up, you know, but I think the service teaches you how to drink. You had to drink like a sailor. You had to learn how to be a sailor or Army or Marine, whatever the case may be. You had to drink. So yeah, it's a culture. It became a culture.
Did you ever experiment with any drugs while you were in the
Drugs, of course. Drugs in the service, yes. Marijuana, cocaine, heroin, a lot of it, speed, THC, a lot of the drugs, and that's probably where my addiction really started progressing even more and more and more, because, like I said, it was about wanting to be accepted by people too. So if somebody says, "Hey, you want to try this? Let's try this," you know. So you're like, "Hey, yeah, I'll try it. Sure, why not?" You know. And then I try this. Let's try this. So yeah, I'll try that. You know. So to be a part of, that's and it kind of started when I first got to my duty station, as well. When I first got to my duty station, it kind of started. When they started with marijuana. Everybody's like, "Yo, you smoke?" Like, yeah, I smoke. Sure. So then it kind of starts there.
So you think that at least some of your addiction problems started in the
Oh yeah,
military?
a lot of my addiction problems started in the military, and then it progressed throughout the military, right into civilian life. I got out of the military and I got a job right at the Postal Service in Oakland, California.
So you went back to Oakland?
I stayed in Oakland. I never came back to New York State.
And you also developed a relationship while you were in the military?
Yes, I had, yeah, my first wife. We're together. We had a set of twins together. And that developed, and then that ended. We were going to get married and wanted to get married, so we did, but then we annulled it because neither one of us wanted to be married. So, yeah, that was that. And then after the service came my second wife. That was while I was working. I'd already been out of the service. Still, as my addiction progressed, job at the post office, then married again, and addiction continued to progress.
So whenever you got out of the military, were you aware of any benefits through the VA?
I wasn't even familiar with the VA. I wasn't even familiar, because then when you get out, I didn't know any. They didn't say anything about the VA. They said, "Here, go sign off all your papers. Here's your discharge papers. Here's your orders. You're gone."
Were you encouraged to report any types of trauma or anything like that?
No, it was just, you're done.
Sure.
Yeah, you could sign up for the. Yeah, you could sign up for the reserves. I did 2 years in active reserves.
Okay.
Didn't have to do anything. Didn't even report, actually. And I didn't know anything about. I was working at the post office. I didn't know anything about the VA. I didn't know anything about getting help. I didn't know anything about the VA at any time until I decided to quit my job at the post office, which was in 1989, after being there for 9 years. And the divorce came before I quit the job, and that just snowballed.
So it sounds like even though you were going through some addiction, you were able to maintain your
Well,
job.
I worked my job. I don't know. Yeah, I guess you could call it functioning. I mean, I went. I was probably high 9 times out of the 10. That I was there. Got high on a consistent basis, drinking. A lot of stuff back then is not. It's a lot of things that happened back then, even Vietnam, and then in the 70s, the 80s. A lot of stuff that took place back then doesn't take place today.
Right.
You know,
It's more regulated.
yes, it's more regulated. It's more strict. You know, so a lot of things that we did back then, you know, was real loose. You know, so you got away with a lot of stuff. But I didn't know anything about the VA. It wasn't until I ended up leaving California finally, um, coming back to New York State, moving back to my parents' house at 31 years old. Um,
So did the addiction damage your marriage?
oh, definitely. The addiction damaged my marriage. The addiction had me quitting a job. Um, Addiction brought me to my knees. Like I said, I came back home in 1989. Moved back in my parents' house. I was 32, I think. And my addiction continued to progress.
It was crack cocaine.
Crack cocaine. It went from, back then in the 80s, it was freebasing. So then it went from, freebasing and drinking weed, to crack cocaine. I was full blown in addiction when I came back. Like I said, I moved back in my parents' house. Then I'm going from Leroy to Rochester, back and forth, and then ended up leaving my parents' house, by my father's wishes.
Sure.
He said, you can't do this, you can't stay here anymore doing it. The one thing that my dad always instilled in us was working, so I always kept a job. I had to keep a job because I had to support my habit. And the later on, the petty larceny started taking place, because like when you run out of money, you're not a woman, so some things you can't do, so you have to find ways and means to get money, and that's when petty larceny came into play. Because my dad says, he didn't understand, why are you stealing? Why are you doing this? He didn't understand that. But I had to feed my addiction, and the only way for me to feed my addiction was through petty larceny. So a lot of my incarceration contained petty larceny, substance abuse, possession, all of that was all about my jail time. And I didn't even become aware. It probably wasn't until 1992 maybe that I became aware of the VA. And that was like my first rehab. I was in a soup kitchen in Rochester, and there was a guy, a priest, I can't remember his name, and he was with an organization, and he pulled up to the soup kitchen and he asked that if there's any veterans here that would like to turn their life around, I suggest that you come and get on this van and I'll take you to the Buffalo VA. So myself and another guy were in there, so we're like, yeah, okay. So I asked him, I said, well, I've got some clothes where I'm staying. Can I go get them? He's like, no, you just come get on right now, and you go right now, or you don't go at all. So I went and I got on the van. That's what brought me to Buffalo, New York. It brought me to my first rehab at the VA hospital. Because I'd never been an inpatient. I did a stint outpatient in Strong Memorial in Rochester.
So you were homeless whenever?
I was homeless. Yeah, I was homeless. I left, like I said, I left my parents in Rochester, living with a relative, sleeping on a couch, basically homeless. Working them labor ready type jobs just to get an end. The person we're staying with, whatever you made that day, most of it, some of it had to go to that person, and then the rest of it went on getting high, and you might get a sandwich, something like that. But then when this guy came and he did that, that was like the beginning of the next journey. Came to Buffalo, New York. I didn't stay clean right away. I came to rehab, and then back and forth in and out of jail here in Buffalo, right up until, like I said, when they started Veterans Court in '08.
So for about 15, 16 years.
About 17, 18 years maybe.
Are you living on the streets during that time?
No. When I came, after doing the rehab in Buffalo, they had what was called the Veterans Coalition housing. So, which it isn't the same as it was when I was in there. So I went and I got to stay in a supportive living house once I did that first rehab. So I stayed in a supportive living house. I stayed there. You could stay there up to 2 years. You get on your feet. You had to go to self-help stuff. You had to get a job. You had to get connected with social services, and then you got put on the Belmont Section 8 list. So I did that, and I got an apartment, and that's when I met my current wife today, doing the self-help thing and going to work. But I was still using. I wasn't clean. I was still using, trying to control it to the best of my ability, and then got in trouble at that job. Ended up going into rehab again. I did altogether. I did 4 rehabs and 1 long-term rehab.
So it sounds several years of this cycle of addiction and trying to go back to rehab, maybe some larceny to support that.
That was all in an 18-year period.
Yeah. Did you ever get any felonies during that time? Violent felonies?
No violent felonies. No violent felonies. The only violent that I actually had was after stealing a car, and the guy caught me. I have pins and screws in my ankle because I jumped out of the car and then I ended up getting ran over. That's the only real violent that I had, but that just got reduced to a misdemeanor.
Sounds like a very traumatic lifestyle, though. I mean, I'd say trauma. But...
Yeah, addiction is a very traumatic lifestyle. When you're caught up in the disease of addiction and you can't find no way out, every day is a mystery. Every day something could happen. I've been stabbed. I've been hit with a bat. I've been hit with a beer bottle. I've ripped off drug dealers. I've been beaten. It's a very the lifestyle is very dangerous. It's a very and when you're an addict or an alcoholic and you get caught up in that, it's hard to see your way out. You have to come to want to get out, and you have to get tired. You have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that's what happened. And as I did that, I started learning about my depression, my anxiety, signs of PTSD, symptomatic, talking to counselors. And that's when a lot of this started coming out. And then we started relating that to why I was doing what I was doing and how it started in the military. Because in the military, like I go back to talking about the racial issues, it wasn't all white on black. It was black on black as well, and white on white as well. So it was a lot of that, so that's where a lot of it started. A lot of the depression, a lot of the anxiety.
Feeling isolated.
Yeah, isolated, talked down to, getting the crappy jobs, whatever the case may be. A lot of it started there, and carried out.
So you're in drug treatment in the early 2000s. At what point did you actually start getting counseling?
I was getting counseling from the time that I went in.
Okay.
I had one counselor who I'm very fond of, who just retired a year or so ago. And this counselor, she was with me for 4 years.
So you had already made the connection between your military service, your drug addiction,
and my mental health, yes.
Before the Veterans Treatment Court, I guess.
Yeah, because the Veterans Treatment Court wasn't around. It was just regular drug court. See, and I was in regular drug court at the time. There was no Veterans Court. I was in that regular drug court probably for 3 years. And then in 2008, when Veterans Drug Court came into be, is when I got out of that and when they put me in there.
do you think that there's something unique about the Veteran Treatment Court that helped you more than the other?
Yeah, there was a lot of things unique about the Veterans Treatment Court because there were veterans in there that understood your dilemma, understood what you were going through. Regular drug court, it wasn't so much that because nobody really cared. They wanted to see you do well, but there wasn't. The mentors in the Veterans Treatment Court actually welcomed you. The feeling that you get when you walk into a courtroom, you don't feel like you're going to get welcomed.
No.
You don't feel like people are going to stand up and salute you and say thank you for your service and, you know, what branch are you in and, you know, what did you do when you were in there? You know, you don't get that. If you go to regular court, it's like, what's your name? The criminal charges, boom, boom. You know, you don't get any of that. You know what I'm saying? Okay, so many days. You know, you don't get the welcome, right? And it becomes emotional. You realize that there are people there that want to help you. Even in the beginning, I didn't take the help. A lot of times I would come back dirty. A lot of times I would run out of Veterans Court. I would leave. They'd say, okay, he's dirty. You have to sit over here in the penalty box or whatever. You know, and then as soon as they turn their back, I'm scooting out the back door because I know that I'm getting ready to go get a sanction. And I wasn't, you know, really trying to go back to jail. So it was like, okay, I'll see you when I see you. And eventually we get caught. And then we come back in again. And some of the people there in Veterans Court, like Pam and Judge and Jack, Nikki, you know, they were all there to help you. And I finally came to the conclusion after the last stint that maybe I just need to take the help. Because all my while in that year that I was in Veterans Court, you know, you either get a 7-day sanction, a 14-day sanction, or a 21-day sanction, and I had them all. So it was like, you know, maybe they really are trying to help me.
Sounds like they didn't give up on you.
They never did give up on me. Judge, like I said early on, Judge wouldn't let me out. I wanted to get out. The public defender that I had, Miss Danielle Michaels, was awesome. She wouldn't let me get out either. She's like, no, we're not going to put that in. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do that. There are a lot of people that were involved in my Veterans Treatment Court experience early on that are really, really important to me in my life and that led to my success to where I am now. You know, get me wrong, I believe in God, and God has a lot to do with it, you know, because I believe that God places people in your life when they need to be placed in your life. You know, we can either go that path or go this path, you know, because I truly believe that we're the only species on Earth that have the will, the power of choice, you know, and I believe that at that time, God rescued me that last time, sent me to jail that last time after a 30-day run after my dad died. Did for me what I couldn't do for myself.
So it sounds like your father dying resurfaced a lot of the issues.
Father dying made it, I need to do something. I mean, I couldn't handle it at first when he died. I went on a 30-day, I ran from drug court again, went on another 30-day binge. And then, like I said, it's like I couldn't stop. So there was a power that stopped me. And as I look at it back today, that power was my faith in God. Born in the church, religious and stuff like that, but not really getting into it all. You're not really into all that when you're a kid. You got to go to church because your parents made you go to church,
Right.
basically. And at that time, the powers to be that were greater than me it wasn't about a God at the time. It was about the judge. It was Jack. It was about Pam. It was about Nikki. It was about Danielle. It was about the police. It was about all these powers greater than me that controlled my life. And looking back on it, these are the powers that I believe that God placed in my life to help turn my life around so that I could be an instrument in carrying a message of recovery and showing other veterans that there's a way out. I truly believe that today.
So what was the process like turning it around to become? So take me through the steps of where you were. And
Turning it around where I am today was that Pam and them in court, they wanted to send me to a program in New York City, which I didn't want to go to. And I told Pam and Danielle, if they send me there, I'm just going to run. You can have another warrant. So Nikki, who happened to be in the courtroom at the time, she said that I heard about this program in Bath that was for veterans. And she at the time said, look, we got this program, 6-month program in Bath, New York. It's for veterans. And I said, I want to go there. And it just so happened that the director of the Bath program happened to be, and because Veterans Court is a teaching court, and a lot of people from a lot of places come, and that's why I say the miracle, because it just so happened that the director of that Bath program happened to be in court that day that I was up there, and Pam didn't know if I was eligible, and Nikki looked up my record, and I was, and the director said I was, and they said, put him in there. So they told me, they said, well, we don't know when there's going to be a bed available for you. So they said, well, we can send you to the Salvation Army and you can wait for a bed. And I said, no. I was with my wife at the time. We weren't married. I said, no, I'm not going to the Salvation Army. I said, I'll just sit in jail. What can it be, a week or so? I can handle that. Well, I sat in jail for 45 days, waiting for a bed to come available. And there was one of the, and my wife came to visit one time, and she told me to say the simple prayer. And I said, yeah, okay, whatever. So I sat there for the 45 days, and I said it, and then I started like feeling it, and I started believing it. And then one day, after the 45 days, they called my name. So I said, okay, I'm finally getting out of here, And during that 45 days, I ran into some other vets that were incarcerated as well. And they were asking me about Veterans Court and this and that. I'm like, yo, man, you might just want to do your time because you might get stuck being in court for, a year, 2 years, whatever the case may be. They're like, no. So they did it. And then eventually I seen some of them guys come back. But so getting out, there was one of the mentors that happened to be a VA police at the time who came to get me out to take me to the rehab. And he said to me that when he came to get me, he said to me that I best not abscond, right? He said, because if you do, I will look for you and hunt you down until I find you, and we'll lock you up again. So I was like, well, okay, who's this dude think he is, for real? But it was like I say, Jason, it goes back to the miracles that happened and the steps that it took, not realizing any of that at the time, but looking back on it today, I can see how influential it was in my life, the power of faith and the power of God, and if I say it, it's because I mean it.
It sounds like a lot of people are invested in your recovery.
A lot of people were invested in me because I believe that those people were put in my life for a reason. And I believe that there was a purpose that I had no idea what it was. So when this mentor, VA police, brought me up to the rehab again, that was probably my fourth one. He told one of the nurses that was at the nurses station who had seen me. He told her, look, if you have any problems with this guy, here's my card, you call me. And she knew me. She's like, oh, you back again? I'm like, yeah. She's like, well, what are you going to do different? I said, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And that's when things started turning around. I relinked with my counselor, the one that I stayed with. She followed me through, helped me. I got involved with the VA volunteer program. She helped me get all that done. I went through all the programs at the VA. They have what's called a incentive therapy program. I went through that. Then they have what's called a CWT program, which is compensated work therapy program. I went through that, which led me to eventually getting hired in 2012, the VA in housekeeping. During that time in Bath, those 6 months, I did 6 months in the Bath rehab. During that time in Bath, I decided to go back to school. I started to take a look at my life for real. So one of the counselors there helped me get linked to school and everything. I got out of there. I went there in July of 2009. January 2009. I got out in July of 2009. I started college at ECC in September. I had a plan to where I would graduate from ECC in 3 years, taking substance abuse and mental health counseling. I did that. I thought I was finished. My professor at ECC at the time, like I said, Jason, there was a lot of people in my life that I had no idea. So the professor told me, said, so what are you going to do now? I got a job at housekeeping. I said, I don't know, I'm done. I got a degree. I'm good, whatever. He's like, no, I'm going to enroll you at UB. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I want you to take what's called interdisciplinary studies at UB and get your bachelor's. I'm like, I'm not trying to go back to school and do all that. But I did. And I went to school 5 years straight. Got my bachelor's. And doing these programs at the VA, I ran across a program manager who was very influential in my recovery as well, that said she was going to get this spot going on the rehab to where I would call a rehabilitation technician, to where you come and talk to the veterans and you work on that unit, the substance abuse unit, the same rehabs that I had went through. So she helped me. She was very influential in getting me that job. So I went from housekeeping to that job within a year and a half. Yeah. So I did that job for, I want to say 3 years. I did that job. And then the peer support specialist job, which I'm currently in, came up. And some of my coworkers were like, yo, that's a perfect job for you. Talking to veterans, helping them find a way out, helping them get their life back together. I'm like, yeah, I'm not trying to do all that. I'm good where I'm at. Jason, I was always satisfied, from all the time in high school, not really wanting to go do this. All the time from being in the service, not really wanting to stay. All the time from, the post office, not really wanting to, I was always just, I'm good, And there was always people that made me go further, to do more. The judge, the mentors, Pam, Nick, all these people, right? And even then on the job, when I'm like, I'm good, I'm good. They're like, no, you're going to do this. So they helped me with the application. One of them made me a portfolio, because at the time I was doing things in Veterans Court, different interviews, different stuff like that. I was doing that stuff. So this person, she put together a portfolio for me. She's no longer at the VA today. And another person, she's no longer at the VA. She's doing, I forget what she's doing now, but these are the two people that were influential to where I'm at, in the position I'm in today. And being peer support and helping veterans find out that there is a way out, that, we can turn our life around, but you got to want to do it. We can give you, like they gave me everything, but it wasn't until I was like, you know what, I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. It wasn't until then that things really, you have to want to do it for yourself. Sure. And all these people that were in my life, I had so much support in my life. Jack is my mentor, was my mentor. I had another mentor, but he was a little easier. I'm like, I'll run over this guy. I can't. So Jack said, don't worry about it, I got him.
What do you think it is about the mentor program that leads to success like yours?
They tell us how it is. No sugarcoating it. Having another veteran tell you, hey, look, dude, this is what it is. Started with Hank Porowski, rest his soul. It started with the vet telling the vet, yo, man, what are you going to do? You're a veteran, right? Come on. You know how to take orders. You know how to follow direction. You know how to do this. Come on. You got morals. You got ethics. You got values. Come on. What are you doing? Let's try to get it together. And Veterans Court gives you the opportunity to do that. Today, like Jack said, today I go into Veterans Court and it's like, it's awesome because everybody in that court is a part of my recovery. Pam, who I always thought was very, very evil, is my best friend, one of my best friends today. Played softball with her and everything, you know what I'm saying? So it's like all these people, really had, what they really have to gain, they're in the people business. So what they have to gain, they're not going to do it, but it's like, they want to save your life, so.
Do you think that there is a lesson that could be learned from veteran treatment court and applied to the criminal justice system at large?
I think the Veterans Treatment Court has applied a lot of stuff to the criminal justice system in large. Just by it becoming the Veterans Treatment Court, by it becoming the first one in the nation, and all these other courts spinning off of it, coming to learn how this thing works, coming to learn how. The Veterans Treatment Court even led to a veterans cell per se, in the city jail. They got their own dorm for veterans. That never was there before. They got their own dorm for veterans. Not saying that like it's a good thing to go to jail and get your own dorm, but they didn't have that. Veterans Court, that's a spin-off of, the sheriff's department or whatever the case may be, spinning off to look to veterans. Not all courts like them. They think that it's easygoing for us as veterans, but it isn't. Because, we're the ones that decided to put our name on the blank check. You know what I'm saying? To be with our life, whatever the case may be. We're the ones that did that. A lot of people didn't do that. So.
Well, you already mentioned that you wanted to sentence out. You would have preferred to take the jail sentence rather than the treatment court.
Yeah.
There's hardship involved with traveling and things like that, right?
Yeah. I just wanted to get out. But nobody would let me out.
Good for you. For them, man.
Exactly.
So, just a few more questions.
Mm-hmm.
This is one that I always ask. Do you think that there is a relationship between trauma and incarceration?
Of course there's a relationship between trauma and incarceration. It's very traumatizing, especially the first time that you might have to go to jail. It's a traumatizing experience. Getting booked and fingerprinted and camera flash in your face, holding a number up against you, and then coming out of your clothes and putting on his orange uniform and getting a bedroll and all of that stuff and getting marched up and getting some of the sheriffs talking to you like you're a piece of crap. It's very traumatizing. Then you get thrown into this big pod with catch that you don't even know. It's fearful and traumatizing. Especially like the first and second time for me. And it started in Oakland, but then carried on here. And then you get to a point to where you learn how to jail. That's very scary. When you know how to jail, when you know how to go to jail and become part of the environment, where you leave whatever you thought you knew on the outside, and then your whole personality has to change. Because you don't want to be that one to where you can be taken advantage of, or the case may be. You want to be that one that you come in and you know what you're talking about, you know what you're doing, you know what's got to be done, it's like, yo, leave me alone, back up, whatever the case may be. You know how to connect with people. So when it gets to that point, that becomes very scary too, because now you're ready to go to jail. Now you get out, you go back to doing the same things because you're not scared. You're not scared to get caught. You're not scared, to go back to jail. Oh crap, here I go. So what?
Do you think that being incarcerated rehabilitates people?
I think it can rehabilitate people if they do it the right way. If they use it to where I don't think it's used to rehabilitate people. I think I took advantage of it the times that I was, the last couple of times that I was in jail. I took advantage of it because They allowed people to go to self-help meetings. They allowed people to go to the church, to the chapel, so I took advantage of that stuff. And the list, basically you start out doing it just to get out of the dorm or to get out of the cell. And then as you do it, you meet people from the outside who come in to talk about these self-help things with you. You meet them, and then you talk to them a little bit after. You meet some of the pastors that come in to do some of the Bible studies and stuff. You meet them, and you talk to them, and then, things start changing, and that was like the last go-round.
Did you have any types of programs in place to help you get a job after you got out of jail? Or to
Well, with the VA, with the VA, veterans, we have programs at the VA that help guys get jobs. Especially, even some that have felonies, they help them get that stuff erased. Like a lot of my criminal record has been expunged due to my completion of Veterans Court at a successful rate. And we have those programs. Like I said, I went through them. The IT program, incentive therapy program. I think they don't do now. They just extended the CWT program, which is compensated work therapy. You have vocational rehab, which they help you look for a job, help you write your resumes. You do them programs. Then you come like I did. I became a volunteer, and then they help you. The voc rehab helps you find jobs, and they keep you working. And then they have what's called veteran supportive services, to where if I think it's 55 and up, to where they can place you for a job as well. So VA has places for veterans to be able to get back into the workforce and back into society. We have it, and a lot of guys, they some of them take advantage of it, some of them don't. But you have to want to work.
Sure.
So yeah, we have those.
What's it like for you, having been on both sides of this scenario, both incarcerated as a veteran and as a veteran mentor?
It's a blessing for me. It's a very, in the beginning, it's a very humbling experience. It's a blessing that I made it, made it out. It's a blessing that I've been put in a position where I can help other veterans. It's a blessing that I have a job to where my supervisors allow me to do my job and help other veterans. It's all around. It's awesome.
Do you think that helping other veterans enables your own recovery?
It definitely does. Helping other veterans helps me in my recovery. Just watching them, where they come from, where they're going, what they're doing. The ones that go back out to using or go back to jail and come back, and then I see them and I ask them, what's going on? Is it different? And they're like, no. It's like, that keeps my mind, that keeps it green for me. It keeps it green to where, okay, this is right where I'm supposed to be.
Does it help you build rapport with other veterans in the criminal justice system, knowing that you've been on both sides?
It helps me build rapport with them because I understand. In the beginning, if they don't know me, they're like, oh, here comes another counselor dude. What's he going to talk about? And then once I tell them who I am and what I've done, then it's like, oh, wow. Okay. Yo, can I ask you a few questions? Can I talk? Yeah. But in the beginning, it's like, okay, what's this dude?
Sure.
And then when they hear, then I see them on a regular basis. Like in the beginning, when I first started, I was really like on fire, recovery, boom, and a lot of guys would see me like, oh, here he comes. We don't want to talk to him right now. So then over the years, it's gotten to where I talk to some people, they told me, they say, you need to try to do it this way or address it this way. So over the years, it's like, hey, I let you find your own way. I just give you some guidance.
I see.
I don't beat you up anymore. I don't, insinuate to do this or tell you to do that or whatever. I like, okay, maybe if you try this, give this a shot, maybe you can turn it around.
Sure.
I always give it a maybe.
If you had advice to veterans who may be returning from Afghanistan today, what would that be?
Get linked to the VA as soon as possible and see what you're going through if you got some stuff going on. Get somebody that you can talk to. You know, don't hold on to it, because the longer you hold on to it, the worse it gets. You know, find someone. You know, you don't need a whole bunch of people. You just need one. Just find that one person that you can talk to, that you can let that stuff go, and then, you know, build upon that, and you know, you can find your way out.
Is talking about your experiences still difficult for you sometimes?
Not as much. Like, especially like where I work at, my I don't have a lot of anonymity where I work. A lot of people know me. A lot of people that I work with, they don't even know that other person.
Interesting.
They know this person. They don't want to know that other person.
Sure.
You really don't, right? But I never forget who that other person is, right? I never forget who that person was, you know. I never forget the kid, then how I became that person, and then where I am today. I never forget, you know. They told me a long time ago that if you forget the last time you were incarcerated or the last time you used, or whatever the case may be, if you forget, then 9 times out of 10 you'll repeat it because you forgot what it was like. So therefore I never forget. You know, that's why I talked about it that day. You know, that day, October 25th, 08. I never forget.
How do you deal with on a bad day?
How do I deal on a bad day? I find somebody to talk to, or some days I just have to put on a hat. You ever see that commercial with the people and they talk about depression and they got the little mask with the smile face on it, but actually behind it you're kind of messed up?
Sure.
Some days that's how I am. You know, I have to have that because somebody might come in, you might come into my office and say, Manny, I really need to talk. And if I'm feeling this way, right, or if I'm feeling this way without the mask, you know, I have to put that on, right, because I have to be there to help you, you know. And then after I help you, then I might have to go find somebody to talk to too. And I have days like that. I have a lot of days like that. Not so many as much as I used to, but I still have them. You know, some days I have in my mind that people are waiting for me to fail. Is it true? No. But some days I can feel that way. You know, it's all about the mental health. You know, so yeah, I don't know.
What do you think that the public needs to understand about why veterans end up in the prison system or jail system?
What do I think that the public needs to understand? That it wasn't easy. That a lot of the jobs that take place in the service aren't taking place in society. What we learn there, you come out to get a job and it's not compatible. You guys that go into infantry or whatever, they get out. What are they going to do? What did they learn how to do? If they can't get a job on like police force or corrections, and then jobs, I hear a lot of jobs in corrections are very tough mentally, you know. So what are they going to do? You know, a lot of stuff that we have in the service, they don't all equate with jobs in the civilian world, and that makes it difficult for veterans, you know. And I don't think that the public understands that, or, you know, sees that, or the corporations, whatever the case may be. I don't think a lot of them see that. You know, you come out and you want to go work on a factory line or whatever. We don't do that. We don't have that, you know. So now we have to come in and get trained, you know, and then our mindset is already one way, and then you have to change your mindset to another way. So it's a culture, you know. And I think that the public actually, I don't really think that they equate with it. That's why I'm grateful that I work in the federal government. That's why I'm grateful I work at the VA. You know, that's a big plus for me. But not everybody can get a job in the VA. You know, not everybody gets a job back in the federal government or state or whatever the case may be. You know, you've got guys that are out there learning how to be truck drivers. You got guys out there that are working on assembly lines. You got guys out there that are cooking. I cooked for a long time, short order cook, and then I went to culinary school in my travels to get a chef degree. that's another person that's grateful in my life. She gave me a job as a cook way back at a hotel. And every time I went to jail and got out, she gave me my job back. She even looked out for my family, looked out for my wife, looked out for the kids. Told my wife to come pick up a check when I didn't even have a check. So Jason, I've had a lot of people in my life that God has placed in my life to take care of me, to serve a purpose. And that's what I try to do. I try to fulfill it and serve a purpose.
And you try to pay it forward.
And I try to pay it forward.
Is there anything throughout the interview that you wanted to talk about that I haven't thought to ask, or anything you wanted to go back to?
No, Jason, I think we covered just about everything. Going back and forth from here to there, I think everything. I think even right up until the last point when I told you about the person I worked for at the hotel, yeah, she always looked out. She even looks out today. She even kept me, it's amazing because she even kept me on the employee roster, right? So like I travel a lot. I do a lot of stuff, AAU basketball. I've been doing it for a long time in the community with the kids from my oldest. Jack and the mentors have always backed me when it comes to AAU. I've found people that come to visit Veterans Court who have donated money to me for the kids to go to activities in AAU basketball. There's just so much. There's so much. There's so much that we could probably sit here for 3 hours and just, I just don't have that time. And you probably don't either. But there's just so much that has taken place in these 10 years of my life, because I've been in recovery 10 years now. October will be 11. There's just so much that's taken place within that 10 years, that's all good. So many people, every time I think about something, I think of another person, whatever, and I was going back to the hotel. She would find me, like, still put me employed. I'm saying, hey, we're going out of town for this tournament, employee discount, whatever. I go up there and she's like, I go to visit. You want lunch? What do you want? You want a cup of coffee? I'm like, no, I don't want anything. Go get lunch. Go get lunch. So these people are still very influential in my life, still today, because I know a lot of them don't want to see me go back where I came from, so they're all positive forces.
If they ended up watching this video one day, what would you want to say to them?
Thank you.
Well, Mr. Welch, congratulations.
Thank
on
you.
Your road to recovery.
Yeah.
It's an amazing story.
Right.
And I'm honored that you shared it with me today.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
I get emotional through this stuff, and and I didn't break down this time. Usually I do, but my eyes just watered a little bit. But voice cracks every now and then. But
it's a strong story. It's very powerful.
there's a lot of people involved in this journey. So my wife, very strong. We've been together for 28 years.
Sounds like a very strong woman.
18 of those years I used. 18 of those years I dealt with my mental health, or not dealt with it.
Well, Manny, I want to thank you not only for your service to your country, but to your community, for helping other veterans and for paying it forward.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for asking me. Appreciate it. All right.